let's just start here because you know, this is the pie which, well, if we're going to start by just analyzing one pie at a time, because I think we can have
Yep.
many sessions focused on many different variations. Um, but I guess best for me it would be to go really systematically and just, um, yeah, just try to be as thorough as possible, especially with like what was tried and what was not tried.
Right. So yeah, I think we should just go in on this Orthodox thing for now.
Yep.
And just really understand that as best possible. So you want to start by just pointing out what the main maybe idea for red here is, and we can sort of work through the variations. So the first thing we were looking at was D3, and then we've slowly kind of transitioned away from playing D3 for white to like after, of course, G11. Like G11 is the main move for red.
Yeah. I guess one thing we can just do is briefly talk first before we go into the main line. I want to talk about some kind of obvious mistakes.
Okay, that's a good idea. Okay.
So like one thing is that there is a bit of hand waving involved in some of our choices, in that we don't necessarily need to test sorry, what I'm trying to say is that like for instance moves like J10 look bad from the beginning. There's certain moves that we just don't really need to spend a lot of time analyzing because they don't add very many new lines of sight. They don't offer red immediate potential for expansion. They don't attack anything properly. They don't help very much to get red off of the corner. So what I
Right.
wanted to just say was that like certain moves are discarded like a priori before we even start considering what are the candidates for red. Like
Right.
moves like J11 or J10, and also moves which are in direct line of sight of white, but which can be attacked immediately and are also still remaining on the edge. Also, probably not so. I mean, maybe we're not correct to immediately discard these moves, but for instance, something like H11 can be responded to by D7, putting this stone under attack immediately. And likewise, K10 gets met by an attack on K7, and K7 gets attacked by H4, and these moves may have some merit at some point, but like if we're just gonna think about like what's good for red to do immediately, we would not jump to one of these options. The other thing is that some people have tried to just spend time capturing the neutral, and this might be something we can talk about because it's not immediately obvious that it's a bad plan, especially on size 6.
I mean, this is certainly, I think, better than the moves that are immediately attacked. But the problem that I've sort of encountered with the going after the neutral, especially from this opening setup, is that after moves like B7 for white, you have so many options for white of 2 stacks along the 7th row that red actually has a very hard time even attacking the neutral successfully.
So something like this.
So I mean, white can play that, or white can play directly to B7 as well.
Oh yes, this is actually. So say red tries something like to capture the neutral, then we start doing our 2 stacks.
Yeah, and then you just essentially every time red attacks, you just shield, and what happens is white gets a super solid center, and from just practical experience, it is more difficult for red to play this position.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely.
It's not impossible.
Yeah,
but
it's not possible because I've definitely had a pretty good games against you with not exactly this. Like this is probably a worse version of what I had against you.
Yeah.
But there are some ways to play the corner game, but it is really tricky and ultimately probably not good.
It seems kind of contingent on whether or not the opponent makes a really significant mistake. Which players at our level probably will happen, but I think as a rule of thumb, it's maybe not best to bet on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Plus, if you have something like red can which was last? Okay, so you have red play something like it's not even possible to play. Oh, because I wanted red to play B1, but it's actually suicidal. So even attacking this isn't easy.
And then what happens is there's a bunch of cuts now that white can try to set up along the edges, and I think it's a bit tricky for red to deal with all of them.
Yeah, and then also getting lines of sight on, for instance, after if red plays something, I don't know what at this point, anything, whatever, and then now white can start the attack
right.
on F11, and it just becomes pretty easy. But I mean so there have been efforts by people in the very beginning when they're starting Tumbleweed to just capture the neutrals red, and I mean I never figured out whether it's actually good or not, and I don't claim either way, but probably white can at least defend against the obvious attacks, because white starts closer, so you can always kind of cut these lines of sight as white.
Right.
Okay, so going back, so there's that, and then the other thing that was tried by first we saw IGBot and AI, and also Atari's editor. All the computers played this move, and so this gambit came out as people were still trying to figure out what to play. I think this gambit on G7 and also G11 came out around similar time because this pie was only. Yeah, sorry.
I thought we had initially been playing the G11 Orthodox setup, and then we learned from AI that the center gambit is actually not that easy to beat without kind of knowing what you're doing. And so then I think we started experimenting with G7 directly.
So do you remember?
And even I remember I played a game with Atari. I won on time, but he was winning, I think, from the red position, and he got a really nice position after the center gambit.
We have this idea of playing a gambit. A gambit meaning because red and white are in line of sight immediately, and it can be attacked immediately. It's the only move that white can use to immediately attack the most recently placed red stack. And now it's red to move, and red can put a second line of sight on the one stack, and white has two lines of sight on the one stack. So when white will capture, it'll be a two stack, and then red can put a third line of sight. So in the variation that AI plays, IGBot plays, and that was played in this game, then it's like a one space jump, E7. So when white captures, so accepting the gambit, which I think is probably the right thing to do, then red has the option of playing this move, which adds a lot of new lines of sight to the board in Sente, forcing white to defend in a clump, and then red continues this round.
But the thing is, white's defense can't counterattack red's one stack, so I think that's the key.
Exactly. So
right?
so the difference here is that after white defends, then all the stacks that red basically played in Sente are safe for the time being, and they can be defended like pretty easily by playing a move like this, where then any future threat um, by red or by white could be parried. But but there's also the opportunity if you play it a different way, like play on f7 instead. The problem here is that once white captures, the same kind of Sente move doesn't really work because then you have an immediate attack, basically forcing white to defend g7 um, turns into a painful situation for red. So it's like forcing white to make a move that's good for it for white. I'm also thinking about this one actually, but have you ever looked at this one before?
That's interesting. No, I don't think we've seen that one. But yeah, okay, just h8. I mean, yeah, h8 seems pretty good.
Yeah. It's not like you can do this because this and this doesn't really also.
Yeah, the piece on f7 I think is just a bit vulnerable here. I think.
It's
and that's sort of a requirement when you attach at the beginning, you know. So that's why I think it's better for the one space like gap.
Yeah. So that's some variations for that one. And ultimately, I think that even though AI prefers this move, I wouldn't ever play it in a human game. Although I would maybe play it for funsies. So if you have any other ideas of like other red responses other than the classical or like other than the main line, we can directly go into the main line now.
No, I think we can go into the main line. I think we should do that.
Yeah. Just one more thing about like these other moves. Like this one, could be good, but I think red has the option of doing a little bit more expansion. Moves like this or this, just by default, extend a little further and give red a little bit more points, totally speaking. So like red gets 20 points to white's 18 here by playing here on J11. But if you play all the way, red's furthest expansion that doesn't see the neutral and doesn't see white is to play a 3-space jump here, and red gets all the way up to 24 points. And it's not like these points really matter in terms of, like, it's not like red's getting any points for real, but it's like the more options you can have in this game, the better chances you have later of playing moves that you need to make to either attack or defend.
So we might just want to note then that G11, like I think the key thing is that this creates the 2 stack on G7, whereby any other red move does not have that option. And so the result is that white no longer can do like a massive like extension to like B7 or whatever, because the 2 stack is always available to cut. And I think that was the main motivation for people to just play this a lot more.
Right. So one thing that, right. That's a good point. Is that like one of the things that we were thinking about a lot in the openings of Tumbleweed in general was the idea of making triangles. So for instance, if red just does some stuff randomly, like these kind of triangles became kind of a thing, which a recurring pattern. And whether or not they're really good in the long run, they do kind of allow, well, undeniably they allow you to make two stacks faster, and they allow you to expand a little bit. They have their weaknesses, but the ability to make a triangle means that you can also control two lines at once. Like, once you can make a triangle that's fairly big, then you control all the space. You make links between your stacks, but you can make two links at once by playing a triangle. And this is kind of strong. And so I do think that it's like, I remember how much triangles affected our way of thinking in the terms of the opening. And I just want to briefly talk about how we got here in the first place, because what happened in a long time ago is what we would do is play something like this, where red's blocked by the neutral, white's not. Actually, even more like this. Red's blocked by the neutral, white's not. And then maybe red would play something to get out from underneath the neutral. And then white would start to play like set up a big triangle. And maybe red plays a triangle and white plays a big triangle. And people were playing these triangular openings for a long time. Really, for like months. It's not maybe a long time, but okay. So this was what was going on.
Right.
Until one day, red had the idea to block the big triangle. So by playing up against the neutral, which it was crazy. And so when white would try to make a big triangle, red would just play this line attack and block it off. And this was really difficult for white for a couple of months, and that's how we started playing moves for white on the other side of the board to actually prevent line attack. So just this whole idea of making triangles, preventing triangles, has guided the way I thought about the opening for the whole time we've been playing Tumbleweed. So it's cool that you mentioned this this idea that like the red makes a triangle and blocks a triangle at the same time.
Well, because when I joined, this was after the line attack had been less popular because the pie had been changing. So the pie that I was seeing when I first joined was I9 and H7. This was like what I was seeing in almost every game.
Yeah.
And I think also this also affected the Orthodox setup, actually, because red's common idea here was to play to D9. That was what I would play. That's what I would see other people play as well. So D9 and then B7, and then, But what we had, I think, realized with the Orthodox pie is that white's control over the seventh row in this position even is actually really, really powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Because any invasion can be cut, right?
Right.
And so the Orthodox pie, red has the opportunity to prevent that from happening. And I think the cut on G7, even for that reason alone, is quite good.
So that would be something more like this.
Right.
Also, do you prefer with the influence on or not?
I think off, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any no matter where red gets put along this central line, red can aim to make a triangle that kind of that blocks the white's seventh line, and the seventh line will be the constant here, because no matter what, I think that red, because if white's not blocking the seventh line, then red can take this G7 point, which appears to be pretty powerful.
Right.
So then
Um,
if H7 if we'll have a second line opening, then you can just play G10, and it's kind of ends up so having the same threats, or for instance.
so the other thing that we should probably note is that the idea of red playing past G7 to get a 3-stack on G7 became popular for a little bit as well.
Yes, for sure. This was this was a really maybe the very first thing that we were thinking about, actually. And maybe we were thinking about triangles for a while, like making a triangle here on G7, but because playing past important critical squares, like adding more lines of sight instead of occupying them, became a theme, and so people started doing it kind of a lot, even if maybe the situation would be better if you just occupy that spot. I mean,
Right.
It's like it becomes kind of stylish thing to do to add lines of sight instead of occupy, or like do a bunch of one stacks that can all kind of indirectly protect each other instead of just playing a higher stack, which won't end up getting captured later.
Well, why don't you play, so in this position, why don't you play white to b7 to sort of illustrate why initially this idea of red playing past. So can you, to b7 instead, just so the immediate attack isn't available.
Right.
Yeah, and then if red plays to g5 or g4 here, essentially anywhere along the g column, and now if you turn on the influence for just a moment, red is really, really solid along that column from like G2 to G11.
Correct. The whole G line is controlled by red.
And so this is sort of what inspired us to start playing D3 as the second move for white instead of a move along 7th row. Because if you play a move to D3, then you can cut red's invasion along the G column, whereas you cannot do that in this position.
Mm-hmm. So, so controlling the 7th line was initially the idea because of previous other because of other responses by red in the past. But then, so this became a default. But then this became a good response, or things like along this G line. I mean, I played like massive extensions, but something like this, and so to combat that idea, because it's so difficult. I mean, before we go to this D3 move, instead, can we just even go deeper into what was tried first? Like, for instance, moves like this allow white to wrest control of that line.
Right. So this move is actually what's really popular right now. So maybe we can hold off on discussing this move until a little bit later.
But is there any reason why, for instance, it doesn't work in this position where it does after, we can talk about it later. But I want to compare and contrast like this situation with the modern situation.
Okay, so the main difference in this, if you play H8 here, is that red can keep attacking the 1 stack, and all the shields are going to be 1s. Whereas a move like if you swap B7 with D7, you'll notice that, or actually E7,
D7
instead
right?
of D7, E7's. But they both work, but this is more sort of solid. Same idea, and then white plays H8. Okay, then red. Let's say red keeps attacking the 1 stacks like along the 11th row or whatever, or here as well.
Okay.
white can play to G7 here, actually, as a 3, and can ignore the capture, because as soon as the capture happens, you just play that, and all of a sudden, red's under attack again.
So it's kind of a delayed recapture or snapback.
Yeah, so the difference then I want to highlight, though, between E7 and B7 is that E7 creates the ability to create a small triangle by coordinating with H10.
So, sorry, but now say I do this again, right?
So I think I think white can probably either shield here, so like anywhere along that, but yeah, I mean, red can keep attacking, but I think it sort of helps white. Like, I remember this game with me and Zapawa, and I had just kept attacking the shields, and it sort of forced white to create this massive group.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. But but why is this worse then for red?
So, wait, sorry, why is it worse for red or worse for white?
So, sorry, yeah, worse for white, because it should be worse for white on this inferior B7. What's the small triangle thing you're talking about?
Yeah, so can you just swap B7 with E7, and I'll show you.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you can play H8, and let's just say red keeps attacking. So we saw in a lot of games H11 here for red.
I think that G8 is more reasonable attack, but okay.
It is probably more reasonable, but just for the sake of argument, H9. So then you have that 2-stack shield, which is only created because E7 was played as opposed to B7.
Yep, exactly. This move.
So that's the main idea here.
Yeah. But let's say.
And you can even create. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go on. What's up?
I was going to say you can even create a smaller triangle. So instead of E7, you can play F7, and that also works.
Yeah, although F7 is a bit scary. I mean, I understand this doesn't work, but let's say we have this again, and then we have this, and then we have this, and now if we do this and we do this, and we have this. Okay, so this is again the snapback. This is then basically this H8 is protected indirectly.
Right.
That's an interesting observation. Is there any? So then between F7 and E7.
Well, I think we should go back to the whole D3 move first, because that was what was popular for a while, and then work our way to this stuff.
True, but something's happening to my computer.
Just so we're sort of organized in the chronology.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So we were at first we were at this G11 move, and so people were playing B7, but then we after B7 we realized that after this move, and that this was still.
This also, by the way, Alec, this move wasn't actually known about. Like, no one played this. So this may even be an option for white in this position, but we didn't actually really see this.
I played this with Hootie on size 8.
Oh, size 8. Okay, maybe it was played on the size 8 stuff. I don't really remember seeing it at size 6 until I played like a bunch of games with Test where he had this idea, and then that's sort of how it became popular.
Right. So Okay, so but this then is not really part of the story.
Right.
Okay, so then instead of this, um, it was thought that after this move, it was too too powerful for red. So
And it also, Alec, the cut on G6 was also what we were trying to avoid.
yeah,
So that's probably important to mention.
right.
And so the only move that prevents the cut on G7 is move like 3 or 4 to D3, like an early move to D3.
Yeah, so games would play out like something like this, and it would be really annoying for white, um, because it wouldn't be very easy for. So red could get a strong center, pretty
Right.
fast, and so instead of allowing, and it is just generally annoying to allow for this this cutting point to be so strongly controlled by the enemy. So making the cutting point instead along a different diagonal where red doesn't already have 2 lines of sight is naturally uh, a an idea.
Right.
So
So now, if red plays to G5 or G4, then all of a sudden the one stack actually seems a bit like unclear, like what it's actually doing.
here it's not even possible for red to do some strong attacks on this one. Now,
Right.
did we I used to play it like this one, right? I think I
Yeah, I think this was what I would play as well, I think.
yeah. So now because the idea for me playing here it's dangerous because first um so like this is something that Pina and I hang on, I need to plug in my computer. This is something that Pina and I thought about a lot before we ever got into any kind of opening theory. The idea that like placing a one stack adjacent to an enemy link is a kind of vulnerable position. So
Yeah, you're right.
just letting the game play out a little bit. It's this one stack that was just played is now having 0 friendly lines of sight. So a parry is just off the table.
Yeah.
And not only that, but it has 1 enemy line of sight, so it's only 1 move away from being attacked and probably captured.
Right. Right.
So, and and more so because of the adjacency between these 2 enemy stacks. So the closer an enemy is, then the more severe the attacking is. So if you need something to be a little bit vulnerable for a moment, that was my rationale for playing a little bit farther away. Now, white does the cut, but red gets this move in Sente, and yeah, this after a defense. This is my line, I guess.
Yeah.
But now both of these stones are 1 move away from a parry, and I believe that it's at least tenable for to red to survive despite there being like a strong white island here, and some influence on the top side.
Yeah. So I think this is probably playable. The problem I think red has encountered is that, firstly, if one of the red stones is captured, then the whole mesh kind of falls apart. So red does need to be a bit careful. But the other problem is that coordinating between the red group on the top, like in the top right, and along the left is difficult. So, for example, what we saw a lot was like a red move to like A5 or something.
Yeah,
Maybe it's white's move now.
it's white's move right now.
Yeah, so white would probably here play E4.
But then
And
you
then
have
so
to
red would parry.
yeah. I don't know, maybe something like that, or maybe.
Yeah, but yeah, so maybe that. But anyways, the problem is that now that white has this essentially line of of stacks that see the left side of the board, it's difficult for red to play there without getting immediately attacked. So a5 is possible, but a5 isn't that helpful without being able to coordinate with the red stacks on the other side of the board.
You just have
yeah,
this
so
weak
you
one
see,
stack, and then it's difficult.
and then this is like I've played this move probably a lot of times, and
This one?
it's become like a key idea almost in this whole opening.
H11?
Yeah, H11. And a point of nuance I think is important to note, okay, is that H11 is actually set up by D3 in the beginning. So
Because
what
it
that means
meshes
is
out
that,
from D3 to D7 to H11.
right, and so that means if white decides to play C2, like it seems that, pretty close, but actually C2 makes it harder to play the cut on the 11th row later on.
True. Very true. That it's like this is where calculating mesh's size comes in to play. Because
Right.
you can kind of predict, okay, what are the natural expansion points for each player? So let's look at C2 instead and do the same sequence. So do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And now we can expand. But actually, this doesn't look so bad for white.
Yeah, you can attack it. It's playable, but the shield, you can, red
But
can shield,
but
and
maybe
it doesn't immediately create the like what you want. I think as white is the double attack. I think that's the most
yeah.
beneficial move.
And now
Right.
I mean that's a bit of a it's a bit of a maybe it wouldn't go down like this, but okay. Yes, and
So it's sort of what stylistic preference as well. So the benefit, of course, of C2 is that C2 creates a cutting potential from the A5 through G11 diagonal. Okay, and that can be useful, but of course, you can't as easily get the double attack along the bottom row. So it kind of depends on what you think is best. I think they're both probably fine.
yeah. Yeah, if it's interesting thinking about I mean, I've always tried to play this one first just because it just allows this white stack to survive easily, um, but yeah, it doesn't link up here, and I wonder if oh god, what was I thinking? Playing, let's see, what was it? Yeah, instead of here, playing something along this. Oh, I forgot what I was.
Are you looking for a move along the fourth row?
Yeah, but it's gonna be bad.
Yeah, that's the thing in this opening. It's like white is always one step ahead as far as cuts go on them.
Mm-hmm. So why
On that
then where are
column.
what happened? Because so let's just go back to oh my god, it stopped. Okay, here we go. So we have this D3, and what did people start doing as red? I mean,
Right. Okay. So here we started playing G7 directly.
right, that was the thing. So it looked to, this attack. It was thrilling, but G4, G5. It was thrilling, but maybe ultimately good defense by white made it too painful for red because of having to handle because white could actually attack red stones and then build up influence to control the left.
Right. Right.
So instead, there was this this idea to play. But what I believe about this move, so why I didn't originally like it is because, well, first of all, because of kind of some bias that I had against, you know, against playing another. It's interesting because it looks really like an extra strong line attack almost. Like, okay, red blocking the triangle by white. Red's playing a move against the neutral along this line. The only other thing that's doing is just making sure that this move is a little stronger than it would have been if it was played first.
Right. So here, the most obvious move for white, like if you haven't really looked at all the variations yet, is actually just G6 or that sort of comes to mind.
It looks
but this
pretty
doesn't
clear.
really work that well.
Because of this, or
because I mean you can attack, but you can also forcibly capture the piece if you play to H8, right? And
oh yeah, then you have nothing.
And this is good for. I think this is just probably good for red.
Yeah, then because actually G6 will also fall pretty fast.
Right. So the thing is that while G7 on its face seems slow because it does not immediately invade white's territory, what it does is delays the invasion and forces white to defend H7 from a different angle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now here we saw a lot of moves like H5 is pretty popular, and red can actually continue the attack. So red can play H8 still.
And wait, before we go on, just considering various options for white. So the idea is that white understands that H7 is under attack, even though it doesn't look like it directly, and so white needs to prepare to parry. And so white, for instance, could play various moves, like this move, but one problem with this move is like it opens up fewer lines of sight than other moves because it runs into the neutral. And it could play this move, which is a 2-stack. It looks kind of strong, but it also opens up fewer lines of sight than another 1-stack. And since like none of these moves are like seeing any red stacks, then probably more beneficial to play a 1-stack here than to play like something like this.
Right. Yeah, I guess we thought that. So H5, for example, allows a 2-stack on D5.
Yeah.
And that's probably good. And so I think it's certainly better than like H3 or something.
Yeah, a 2-stack on the center, allowing for the potential of 2-stack on the center, versus just directly playing a 2-stack on the edge. It's probably better.
Right.
So
also here, maybe we should note that Atari was playing J7 instead of H5. So H5 is a move that I usually played. Atari played either J7 or even in some games he played J9.
So
both with the same idea of H5, but a little bit more aggressive.
J7 or J9? Yeah, J7 I also considered. I also think of K7.
K7. Oh, K7's interesting.
Because it's not... If this one stays alive, then this one will stay alive.
Yeah.
Oops. I don't want to go into R. Okay. But anyway, so back to your variation.
So I don't know which one do you want to look at? Do you want to look at the H5 one?
No, it's frozen. Hang on.
Okay.
Oops. Yeah, I want to go back to this one. Okay.
So here we were debating a long time actually, and honestly, I don't really know what we concluded. What we were debating on was when red should invade via G2. That was the idea. So, for example, red can play B6 here, okay? And red can also play A2. But B6 is helpful because it sets up a potential 2-stack on B2 after red plays G2. So
wait.
the idea of
red can't play A2. So what are you saying? Oh, G2.
no, so yeah, so B6 is sort of like a long-term idea. The idea is to coordinate behind white's pieces with hopefully another piece on G2. That's the idea. But it's not the easiest thing to accomplish. And so we're not really sure on what the best approach for red here is, nor are we really sure what the best approach for white is. I think there's a bunch of options.
Yeah. But I guess so one of the moves was B6. And what would you actually play in this position right now as red?
As red, I would probably play either C7, B6, or A5. I wouldn't attack, actually. I would not attack H7 because it can be so easily parried. And so I would probably play, either A5, B6, or C7.
A5 looks like this comes immediately, but then we have this.
Yeah,
but then
so
we
that's
have
nice.
This. So hang on, maybe not this one. Maybe after this we have, but only one stacks. Is it nice? Let's see. This, and then we have 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 this.
I think this is probably better for red, but
this one will definitely die, and then this neutral probably goes to red, and maybe this one even dies. I mean, this might. I mean, I'm not playing best moves here, but this is an interesting thing. You use this A5 stone as a sacrifice to just break down whatever white's building.
Right.
Because this stack, I mean, if you're trading a edge stack for a center stack, in the opening, it's probably good. Unless it leads to a chain reaction. And if red gets to play A5 without being immediately attacked via A3, then probably red gets, a little bit of red gets a little bit of extra time to gain more lines of sight into white's area. And that's all red needs to gain the upper hand, to kind of overcome that positional disadvantage imposed by the pie.
Right.
So what do you think about this one? Or
yeah, so this is, I think I've played this a couple times. The reason I didn't like it was because it sees the red, like it essentially, its lines of sight are blocked by red's pieces.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel as as expansive as it could be, although of course it's incredibly strong. And so I guess it sort of also depends on what your playing style is. But personally, I think C7 seems a bit too slow for me.
I agree. I think playing in the meshes, it's really it's kind of good if you just want to play strong moves and you don't really care where you're going with it. But if you want to play really precisely, then playing with meshes will lead to a lot of holes in your position.
Right. The other thing maybe it's worth mentioning is that we had played around with the idea of red directly attacking the neutral in this position. Right. So F8.
Okay, F8.
The idea, it seems slow. So the idea is that
F7.
Sorry, F7, not F8. Yeah. The idea is that once red captures a neutral, then some new lines of sight will be open into white's territory. Plus, red will have a strong center, and I think it's playable for red, but it does seem a bit slow. But it's not like immediately losing. Like it's actually not terrible.
Right.
So yeah, again, it depends, I guess, if you like a strong center
I've
or not.
I've commonly liked to refer to the neutral as like a capacitor for tension in the game. All this
Right.
tension builds up along the center, and then whoever captures it, just boom, all these new lines of sight.
Right.
Um, so in these kind of positions, how did you decide that it would be worth it for white to switch the idea? I mean, clearly, red playing in this triangle. The way I view the story, maybe I'm wrong, was that after this triangular move, after G7 was found, then then came white directly playing E7 instead of D3 on
Right.
move one.
Yeah. So the what happened was that red in a lot of these games was just slightly ahead, and we were looking for moves as white that would not only be equal but actually better for white. And no matter what we tried in the D3 variation, it seems that we couldn't get an advantage for white. We could get equality in a lot of positions, but it was unclear as to whether or not white was actually ahead from the opening.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what, and as a result, we wanted to refute the G7 move more concretely. And that's what sort of led us to the E7 idea. So here, if white plays G7, if red plays G7, white can immediately counterattack. And this is good for white. Like, I mean, we only have our games to go off, but based on that experience, white has been doing incredibly well, actually.
It's because of this move here?
Yeah, so that moves the shield, and then you play E6 for white. And then let's say red wants to go after the one stack. So you can play H8 here for red. This is a move we tried. And actually, this move was looking good for red for a while until we discovered F5 here for white.
So let's not play F5 first. Let's first see what happens when we capture, captures,
and then captures for red.
Yeah. And here, I think red looks a little better. Red has two more pieces, and red and white are fairly equally centralized, I guess. White's a little more central. White has a 3-stack, but, I mean, and it's white to move, but red has more lines of sight in here, and red has additional support from 2 extra pieces. I think it looks a little good for red.
Yeah, I agree. And so I've actually played this exact opening a couple times. I played it with Zapow, I played it with Atari, and I think in all the games, or at least the majority of them, red was comfortably winning, actually. And so when red started winning out of this variation, we realized that white needed something better, and so then we had been experimenting with F5. F5 is seeming like a slow move because it allows red to just capture and then capture again, but red actually can't capture G. So there's that, but also the 2 stack on G6 is very vulnerable here.
Okay, so actually, if red captures and then white accidentally captures in response, then red does the attack on the 1 stack, which was just placed earlier. So that's not a good move. So instead, red capturing here is a mistake.
Then white G5, and if you just turn on the influence for just a moment, it's pretty interesting. So white is doing pretty well here, and the problem for red is that it's not super easy to find a good invasion move, and the reason for that is because red has 2 pieces under attack. And so every time red invades, like, white can just capture and then attack something new. And red's doing a bit like this. Like, red can win here, but it's not easy.
I mean, white has a strong position, so, and white doesn't need to capture everything. Like, this one doesn't need to be captured, of course. If he goes here, I would just start. Cleaning up around the edges.
You don't even need to allow this. So you can play, if you go back a couple moves, you can even play, so here, here I would probably capture on F7, but again, red's invasion moves aren't that great.
I don't know. I mean, both of them are threatening.
I get the sense, though, that when you invade, so that doesn't work.
You put a bunch of weak stacks down.
But here, so, I mean, white can even cut here on H6.
That's true. I mean, certain areas of the board are just completely white. Even though, even though red has a almost equal influence, these stacks are really vulnerable, and they have to work super hard to make any life.
I guess it's one of those positions where, maybe it works for red, but just practically speaking, I don't think it's that easthat's No. And so I'd probably just pick white just to be a bit safer.
Yeah, and there's also this. Not that that's more important than up here. This is the most important here, but I agree that many of these judgments, about the result of opening sequences are going to be based on our evaluation of a middle game position, which, like, we can't always know. We just know what we feel when we see the position.
Right.
We don't have so much to go off of, but there certain positions are looking pretty clear cut, and some of them just look interesting. But anyway, nonetheless, no matter what the absolute, perfect play is, I'm more interested in the story of the moves that led to the main line.
Right. So after this F5 move was figured out, and it was determined that white has a nice, comfortable game, we wanted to be playing something else for red. Yeah. So now we're at the current, theory, essentially. This is, if you look at the games between me and Atari over the last couple of weeks, this is what we're playing. So we play here red G5. And so this is interesting because it sort of goes back to the idea that we had discussed earlier with red invading after white has played D3.
Right. You talking about this move?
the actual like type of position you get is actually quite a bit different, as you'll see. So yeah, so this is where tests move from a couple months ago actually becomes super important again. So
yeah,
here white plays h8 to essentially gain control of the center and prevent, importantly, the cut on g7.
yeah.
And then red has a pretty nice move here to c5. So what's important about this move is that white can't attack it via c7 because c7 is there's two lines of sight on it from red.
Yeah.
So here, what we've been doing as white is we played a c2 to attack the piece, and then we shield on c3, and then we attack the shield, so we play d3, and then we play to e5.
So then captures.
Then, so either white can capture, but what is more interesting actually is if white uses, this is some really nice coordination. So white can use d3, which was played to attack the shield, to put a 2-stack shield on d6.
This is better, yeah.
And so this is the main line of what we've been doing recently. And
then you have the parry.
Yep. And here we've been experimenting a lot, but that's sort of where we're at nowadays.
Wow. It looks, yeah, I mean, it looks like you just went through a lot of moves that don't have as much, like, you didn't give me as much justification by trial and error for the sequence you just listed off than all the rest of the other history. But is it possible to go through some of it?
So yeah, we can. Do you want to do a bit of trial and error? I can show you some of the other ideas tried for white, just to sort of explain the rationale for all that.
So first of all, I just want to talk about this briefly. So like, I know we've talked about it privately, but like now that I'm recording this, I'm realizing I can maybe use this stream, or like the recording, for a video or something, on opening. So as long as I cut out all the parts where, where we're just talking about random shit, like right now. Like, I mean, this very second, I'll probably cut it out. But going back to okay. So, like, for instance, this move by Test, that Test 654, random raw, which you've told me previously, I thought the idea behind this was super cool because, red can create lots of different one stacks along the edge, essentially, to try to do a pinwheel attack on this central stack, but then this basically forces white to get a kind of a strong piece, a strong group in the center, whereas red is all spread out and is easily attackable later. And
right.
becomes vulnerable.
Sorry, can you just give me 1 moment?
Yeah, me too.
Sorry, you still
Yeah.
there?
All right. Are you you're back? You still there?
Yep. Hello.
All right. So. Uh,
Okay.
uh,
Yeah. So this move by Tess, this is really interesting, because it seems on face that red can attack it,
right.
and that's sort of been the driving force in a lot of the variations we've looked at.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so if red attacks it from the bottom and the sides, then what happens is white creates all these shields, and each shield is not only a two stack, but it also helps white expand a little bit.
Yeah.
And so we've sort of decided that this is not really most optimal for red, simply because the attacks don't really lead to anything. The other idea that you can play here is you can play a more central attack, which is a little bit more interesting. So you can play G8. The problem with this one is that, again, after G7, for white, like, you know, can red really capture? Maybe not, because white can immediately counterattack.
Right.
And so we're sort of struggling to find an effective way for red to attack H8, and that's why we have decided to just abandon the idea and do something else as red.
Yeah. So instead of attacking H8, what was the move that you played? It was use this C5.
Yeah, we played C5.
So interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Yes, because it's a move that on another move that on the surface might look like, okay, well, this can be attacked as well, but actually the moves come stemming from F7 or E7 would be suicidal. All of them, C7
Right.
and E5. That's not possible. And of
Right.
course, E7 is not directly under attack. Nothing's directly under attack. So the only remaining one, and of course we have also a move like C8. Okay, but if you compare C8 to C2, I guess you might prefer one that's on the edge and that's more expansive. Because this one remains white still only has two lines, horizontally speaking. And let me just also just compare the point values here: 31 to 27 versus 28 to 27. So it takes away a little bit of red's influence.
Yeah. I mean, if white, let's say white plays C8 instead,
Mm-hmm.
Instead of C2, and then red shields on C7.
Oh, then it looks too good for.
Then E7's under attack, and then white probably has to defend that. So it just doesn't seem like the most effective.
Yep. It's much. I didn't see that this shield was so good. Makes sense. This here, at least you said this one, right?
Yeah. We have also looked at C4. If you want to talk about that one before, because we had played C4 initially, and then we learned about C3 from the AI.
Okay. C4,
So,
yeah. And also just to point out that it's really not. Um, it doesn't look obvious that it would be good at all to play any other kind of move. So I'm saying that a shield looks probably necessary, some kind of shield, at least here,
yeah,
or because otherwise there's no real sente parry moves because you can attack, but then the capture removes the attack.
exactly.
So that's why, and And a move like this, C4. I mean, yes, it's definitely the most solid, safest move, but um, when I start thinking about shields, um, yeah, it's definitely a question, a big question of how to shield and whether to shield to allow yourself to play another stronger shield later, or just to play the stronger but yet like long term weaker shield. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know what you're saying. So I mean, C4 is certainly it's not terrible. Like it's not losing, at least from our analysis. But the thing is that C4. Um, so let's say white attacks C4.
how?
White can play there. Um, um, like when red defends uh, C4,
It's also a crappy
um,
shield.
like that, it doesn't come with an attack. So red here can play E5, um, and you can have that exchange. But um, it, we thought that C3 was a bit better because C3 creates the idea of a 3-stack on E5 as opposed to a 2-stack, and as a result, red's a little bit more solid in the center.
Yeah, the difference is
And so
striking. Here,
yeah, it's similar, but now red has the 2-stack in the middle, and
this can be
it's still,
attacked, and then this can be later attacked.
yeah.
So instead of this exchange, what happened was this. Let's see.
Yeah, so it seems kind of obvious for white to just immediately attack the shield, but the shield is actually a little bit safer than it seems because if white plays D3 and then red plays to E5, it just to counterattack. If white captures the shield on C3 and then red captures E7, we just thought that this looked better for red. Like, I don't know what you think.
I think that you're probably right because white has one fairly strong group, but it's sequestered in the north, and
Right.
then has a fairly weak. I mean, like 2 1-stacks, like they could be defended, but each of them have um, one enemy line of sight already, and so probably what will end up happening is some shielding action and with allowing red to get a bunch of sensei moves around it and surround the rest of the board.
Right.
It's my like surface level analysis.
So it should probably also be noted that if white decides to like play a very aggressive cutting move like F5,
This is
then
bad.
that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because red just counterattacks, and so the impact is that white can't actually um, disconnect the coordination of red's central group, and so red remains quite solid.
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking at that too. So then instead of this sequence with the trade, we get a shield. And then
Yep.
how did you finish this sequence? Oh, this.
Yeah. So
Which also looks.
there's that.
I think that in terms of how. I mean, white looks. Okay, hang on, wait a minute. But if I do this, and then this, I guess you can capture it back.
Right.
So this is another one of these recurring patterns with the delayed recapture that it's so cool for me to see this because actually with these one stack plays, like where you have a one stack adjacent to another one stack, you parry with an attack. But it's
Right.
cool because sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. And
Right.
then you have this, and it's like a co-fight or something, but it's guaranteed to end. It's like temporary co or something.
I guess we sort of like um, that sort of remained an ambiguous consideration for us. Like we don't know exactly when the right point is for red or white to pursue the captures in the bottom, or sorry, in the I'm used to playing it flipped in the top area.
Mm, right. Um, yeah, that's really interesting. I um, I think
So
that we have. Is there any like? Oh, sorry, go on because I'm about to basically say we're done, just because
yeah,
I
no,
don't know where
I
to
don't
go
think
from here.
we need to add anything else. This we've been experimenting a lot in this position. Just actually maybe just to cap it off to make sure this analysis is as current as possible. The white move here that we play is D5.
After what? After B2?
So after B2, then we play D5 as white, and then um, D4 as red,
Well,
and
I don't know.
yeah, something like that. So we've had this position a couple times. We're also now trying to figure out how we can integrate um, G8 back into all of this, like um, all of this playing, because the G8 idea still remains important for
Right.
red, so long as white's one stack is still vulnerable, and it's sort of an open question as to when red should play that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is another thing we've tried.
It's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I'm just playing random, like just to see how it looks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
Anyways,
all
yeah,
coming.
that's about it.
And that's all coming from this one. Yeah, the
Yeah.
C5 moves is interesting. Yeah, um, and that's all coming from this one, the test move. I
Yeah.
kind of want to show you sometime the game that I played with. Oh, I think I have a stream about it.
Which stream or which game was this?
I'll send it to you sometime. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Like I'll
Okay.
find it and send it to you after this.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Thanks a lot for doing this